This story begins at the Mo sect, which is a small settlement on top of a mountain. Somewhere in the sky, we see two people flying on a magic carpet. The older of the two girls tells the other, named Xiao Q, that they'll soon arrive at the border of the Mo sect, and also warns her not to get lost. Soon enough, they land in front of a temple with an insanely tall flight of stairs. As such, the older girl, Lu Dongli, carries Xiao Q on her back so they can get to the top. And while she's climbing up, she tells the little girl to familiarize herself with the mountain's surroundings while she's here. She also promises to tell Xiao Q about the sect rules and other things she should take note of, and the little girl assures her master that she'll listen carefully. The master suddenly starts talking about the rules, but it all comes out as gibberish, and the little girl has no idea what she just said. The confused girl is still trying to figure out what just happened, when her master states that she's done with the rules, and claims that it's time for the important points. As they float up the stairs, the master informs her that they are the Mo sect, and are a total of 10 members. She reveals that she has 6 disciples, while another one of them is the sect leader's disciple. Xiao listens very carefully as the master informs her that the sect leader is her brother, who is 6 years older than her. Because of this, she tells the little girl that she must treat him with respect, even more than she would respect her own master. However, she also informs Xiao that she's not allowed to be alone with the sect leader or even learn from him. Hearing this, the curious little girl wonders if the sect leader eats kids, but her master assures her that he doesn't. But that's before she reveals that the true reason is even scarier, which is the fact that her brother is ailed by a rather troublesome illness. Just then, we see a flashback of the sect leader informing his sister that their world is just a game that they're stuck in. Because of this, she feels that her brother has some sort of mental illness, since she can't bring herself to believe that she's living inside a game. After their parents passed away, the boy could no longer remember his real age, and always kept talking about some main character's template, which his sister couldn't understand. Back in the present, the master admits that her older brother has a few loose screws in his head, leaving her no choice but to get stronger so the sect can rely on her instead. Just then, the master and student spot the delusional sect leader, Liu Kao, standing on the edge of a cliff, and talking about how this world would live in darkness if it wasn't for him. Xiao Q is instantly mesmerized by his charm when she sees his face, but her master tells her not to listen to his gibberish. The sect leader brags about how lucky Xiao is to join his sect, but his sister thinks otherwise. She claims that the little girl is so talented that she would easily get accepted into better sects, so she feels that she's actually the lucky one to have such a student. The master fears that Xiao would get influenced by her brother's delusional teachings, so she tries to get the already infatuated girl away from him by suggesting that she needs to rest. Xiao tries to talk to him, but her master tells her not to look back, and as they leave the scene, the sect master begins to wonder where his sister found such a talented girl. He's impressed with her high stats, and starts to recall how there haven't been any cheat codes since he arrived in the game 21 years ago. It turns out that he's not so crazy after all, because we learn that he's currently inside the biggest virtual world in the 22nd century. It's called the Tangshuan world, and it's so expansive that people have started calling it a parallel dimension. According to the sect master's calculations, the game should undergo its beta testing soon. And as if right on cue, a notification appears, confirming his prediction. As a result of this, he obtains the right to access his character stats panel. Liu Kao sees that his character is at level 10, with max health points, and a spiritual level that's almost at the peak. His core bone, swordsmanship, and charm are also very high, and can be increased even further, but his luck is stuck at 3.14, and it makes him pretty upset. Overall, the system calls him a very handsome but useless character. My guy takes what he can get and acknowledges the flattery, because he feels that while weakness is temporary, good looks last forever. Another announcement pops up, revealing that the beta testing stage would officially start in 30 Earth days. Liu Kao gets excited to see this, because he realizes that it's equivalent to 300 days in Tangshuan. The excitement of noob players arriving in the game dies down, when the sect leader remembers how he no longer has any attachment to his former world. In a flashback scene, we see Liu Kao's life back on Earth, and how he was a rich, handsome, and thoroughly spoiled kid who got literally anything he wanted. In his previous life, he enjoyed toying with people in real life and games. And even though he was just an average player, his wealth was always his special power. He had it easy while playing games, because he could simply spend millions to make himself invincible to monsters, and he expected others to be able to do the same. Liu Kao was a pretty lonely kid in the real world, especially since his wealthy parents no longer came home after they started processing their divorce. He was literally an orphan whose parents were still alive, and they neglected him so much that the only form of communication he had was the numerous transactions he carried out. As you can imagine, it didn't take long before he eventually lost interest in everything, because although he could have everything he wanted, he also lost everything he had. Having nothing else to do, he one day logged back into the game, and when he opened his eyes, he realized that he had been reborn into a family of nobles. When his new parents saw him, they were overjoyed and decided to name him Lukeo, which means early morning song. The young sect leader never imagined that he would be born again, let alone acquire what he had always desired in his past life. He realized that among the hundreds of thousands of things in the world, love and affection would never disappoint. His memories are interrupted by a message from the system, informing him that the mission function has been unlocked, and also asking him if he would like to accept. He accepts the mission, revealing that he's been idle for the past 21 years in the game, and now that he's gathered a lot of experience, he can't deny the opportunity to level up with missions. The handsome player pushes the button to accept, and after the system scans the sect, it identifies him as the leader, before informing him that his mission is to strengthen and expand his sect. When Lukeo sees this, he suddenly remembers that it was his father's long and cherished dream to achieve this, so he's more than willing to complete the mission. Our hero pushes a button for more details on the mission, so the system begins grading the entire place. Unfortunately, while Lukeo is eagerly waiting to begin, a certain message leaves him horrified, which reveals that his sect is unqualified. Even though he knows the Mo sect is quite mid, he never imagined that it would be unqualified to even start his first mission. According to what he knows, the lowest sects in the Tiangshuan world are the 9th rank, while the Sword sect among the top 4 biggest organizations is considered the 1st rank. Our hero also recalls something about a special rank which no longer exists, and all of this makes him much more upset that his sect is practically the worst in the virtual world. He wonders what could make it unqualified, and thinks that there might be a bug in the system. He does some digging, and realizes that while the sect is qualified by having up to 10 members, his beginner rank level as the sect leader is the drawback. Because, for complete qualification of the mission, the leader is required to be at least 1st rank or higher. At this point, Lukeo sighs in disappointment, and realizes that he's the problem, concluding that he must go down the mountains the following day to get his breakthrough. However, he suddenly remembers that if his Mo sect is unqualified, then it should have been kicked out of the 300 sects that rule this world. But that isn't the case, because there's a certain lady in this place who also belongs to the 1st-ranked Sword sect, and it pleases him to know that her connections are proving very useful. The young leader walks into a graveyard and knocks on a headstone, announcing that the offerings have arrived. It turns out that apart from his official members, there's someone else who keeps themselves hidden. Centuries ago, this person was brought back by the 31st leader of the sect, after seeing their extraordinary powers in person. Because of how strong they were compared to the rest of their peers in this place, the master cultivator chose to live in seclusion at the cemetery. As the master's energy starts to thicken across the cemetery, Lukeo starts to see the pros and cons of this partnership. The good part is that he won't need to make a grave for this master when they die, but on the other hand, he won't ever be able to confirm if they're actually dead or alive. After all, he has only ever communicated through their energy and never met the master in person. Either way, the scene changes, and the next thing we see is the sect leader having a high authority meeting with his sister, referring to her as Elder Lu. Seated at the table, he informs her that he would like to settle the matter of going on the dangerous journey down the mountain, but she just feels that Lukeo's acting addiction is surfacing again. He takes offense, and reminds her that insulting the sect leader could earn her the punishment of him pinching her cheeks. At this point, it's easy to see why no one really takes him seriously, and when she leans backward to get away from him, he gets even more offended. The sister ignores his tantrums, and speaks with maturity, asking him why he wants to go down the mountain. Our boy slams the table and responds radically, claiming that he needs to achieve a breakthrough. But in order to do this, he needs a certain herb called the marrow-cleansing spirit grass, which he would have to dig out himself. Hearing this, Lu expresses her excitement that her brother finally wants to achieve another breakthrough, after many years of acquiring only the beginner's rank. After warning her not to mock him, he reveals that apart from achieving a breakthrough, he would also like to spread the Mo sect throughout this world, so he can bring honor to their ancestors. Seeing this exaggerated display, the girl concludes that his hero complex is back, and his tendency to show off has become even higher. The following morning, the sect leader, his only disciple Hai Ting, along with his sister and Xiao Q, prepare to set out for the journey. Lukeo asks his sister why they have to wear such ordinary clothes, and complains that the outfit won't show that he's a sage with an outstanding nature. But his sister tells him to keep quiet, reminding him that normal clothes are better to avoid attracting unwanted attention. While he's feeling that his little sister is too mature, 2 spies watch them from a nearby tree. And after confirming that the sect leader is still a loudmouth as ever, they plot their next move. The scene shifts, and we see the crew on their flying leaf carpet. As they soar through the air, the little disciple points out how the forest beneath them is actually red, and her master informs her that it's the Forest of Flames, the place where they'll search for the marrow-cleansing grass. Xiao then asks her master why the sect master has been staring into space since the journey started, so she informs the little girl that her brother is actually cultivating. This art of sitting still and meditating is needed by every cultivator, and Lu informs her disciple that she would need to learn a lot about it in the future. Hearing this, the little girl gets excited because she finds the handsome sect leader amazing and would also like to meditate in the future as well. In reality, Lukeo is actually just choosing a mission from the system. And while he's doing this, he sees that the leveling up missions are of 4 colors, which are yellow, blue, purple, and orange. As expected, it's the same with his previous life, so he wonders which of the missions he should pick this time. The sect master is aware that most players pick yellow because it's simple and quick. Blue, on the other hand, is what the experts choose, while purple is only chosen by professional players. As for the orange mission, only 1 in a million would choose it, because only those with enormous amounts of money had the guts to choose the hardest difficulty. After considering all the factors, the sect leader makes his choice and picks the most difficult mission by selecting orange. After successfully acquiring the mission, a wave of satisfaction washes over him. But while he's busy feeling fulfilled, we see that another magic carpet hidden in invisibility is secretly following them from behind. As the spies quietly follow the Mo sect leader and his members, one of them, named Master Ning, admits that the winds are a little too loud. Her disciple asks her if following the Mo sect so closely won't blow their cover, and in response, Ning confidently assures him that they won't be able to see her, even if she stands in front of them naked. The disciple gets the point, but comments that such an exaggerated description wasn't needed. His master asks him in return whether he tagged along to see Lukeo advance to the next level out of admiration, or simply because of jealousy. Hearing this, the boy stares at the back of our hero and realizes that if he were to be perfectly honest, he's only following him out of hatred. Master Ning teases him after his response, reminding him that he's the best swordmaster in the young generation, and pointing out that earning his hatred is not an easy feat. Meanwhile, the Mo sect members arrive in the Flame Forest, and Lu Dongli reminds everyone that they're leaving immediately after they find the marrow-cleansing grass, because there are monsters around. Lukeo suddenly asks his sister if she's hiding her cultivation, pointing out how stably she landed for someone on her level. In response, she laughs with guilt laced all over her face and denies the allegation, but the sect leader can clearly see that she's lying. He quickly shakes off the thought, however, and instructs the group to begin the search for the marrow-cleansing grass. Just then, a message appears, informing them that they have a submission to defeat a wild monster of level 10, which is basically a boss-level fight. Seeing this, the sect leader realizes that the mission isn't as easy as they thought, and he even starts to wonder if a monster at that level even exists. He also knows that strong bosses are easy to find, while it's the weak ones that are rare. And while he's pondering on this, his sister interrupts him, revealing that she's already found 3 marrow-cleansing grass herbs lying in plain sight. The little disciple gets a sense of how good the grass smells, and even feels like eating them. But before they can get close to their objective, a monster appears behind the tree where the grass is. Dongli informs the others and warns them to stand back, and that's about the same time when the mission target is locked on. The sect leader confidently steps forward, telling his members that no one shall move, and assuring them that he'll eat the marrow-cleansing grass because not even Jesus can stop him from doing so. As you can imagine, when his sister sees him doing this, she realizes that they might have a problem, because she knows that her brother is definitely acting up again. All of a sudden, Lukeo starts walking towards the monster, feeling that his low luck was just a ruse, because he now feels that he must be very lucky to have found 3 of the marrow-cleansing grass at once, as well as finding the exact monster required for the mission in the same place. His decision causes his sister to freak out, because she fears that her clueless brother is being a little too brave. Xiao Q, on the other hand, seems to find the sect leader's decision very cool. Not sure what would happen, Dongli ultimately decides that if the monster turns out to be weak, she'd leave it for her brother to defeat. But if it's actually strong, then she'll have to kill it herself, which means that she's going to stay on her guard. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, the spies are secretly watching everything. The swordsman informs his master that he's sensed that the monster is at rank 9, and has also achieved a beginner's rank as well. Hearing this, Ning asks him what he thinks the Mo sect leader would do. The boy responds that although they're on the same level, monsters have stronger bodies compared to humans, so Lukeo would probably have to lure it aside to defeat it in a single move. Master Ning agrees with him, but as they look at the guy lurking about the tree and carelessly picking the grass, she's forced to comment that he probably doesn't have a single plan in mind. While my dude was busy picking up herbs from the tree, the giant black patterned snake suddenly charged at him from behind. However, it turns out to be a simple luring strategy, because our hero wanted to appear as a weak prey to the monster. While his members are yelling for him to look out, he looks at the creature with confidence, wondering if it belongs to a high-ranking bloodline of monsters. But regardless of its origin, Lukeo pulls out his sword, and promises to beat the snake's head till it's crooked for life. As the spy watches this, he snaps his neck to the side out of reflex. And when Master Ning asks him what's wrong, he pretends that it's nothing. In reality, he's wondering why he still reacted on reflex, even though it's been so many years since his encounter with our hero. He recalls a memory of the past, when he was being lectured by our hero for going rampant in their sect, claiming himself as some sort of sword master. Confronted by our hero, he tried to act as if he was being disrespected by his presence, but Lukeo beat some sense into him by slapping him hard on the cheek. Skilled or not, our boy couldn't tolerate not being called a senior disciple by his junior. That one slap completely woke up the spy's young and arrogant self, but it wasn't what made him submit to Lukeo. Instead, it was his insane cultivating speed and his observation skills. And truly, we see that the Mo sect leader managed to take down the monster by hitting its vital point in a single move. Afterward, Lukeo absorbs the snake and turns it into experience points, making Xiaoqiu even more fascinated by his strength. Of course, his sister isn't impressed in the slightest. She feels that he went out of his way to use extravagant techniques and wasted his energy, not even taking into account that another monster could be lurking close. After defeating the monster, Lukeo acquires 10,000 experience points, and since his level up mission is complete as well, he's given the chance to receive his rewards. He's pleased with the 10,000 experience points and gladly accepts the mission rewards too. The sect leader is surprised when he sees that the reward is the Attribute Awakening coupon, because it means that he either has extraordinary talent or has been favored by the gods. The summary of this is that he can now control different elements by changing his spiritual attribute using this coupon, which will also strengthen his affinity with his chosen element. For instance, if lightning is chosen, it will become thunder. If gale is chosen, it will turn into a strong wind. Lukeo recalls how his sister has the wind attribute in her control, so he's eager to find what his own attribute is going to be. Now that he has attained the grass he was after, our hero wants to step out of the flame forest and go somewhere safer so he can properly meditate and break through to a new realm of power. He takes only one of the grass herbs and assures his team that it's enough, because he feels that they should leave the rest for anyone who might need them later. As they leave the forest on their magic carpet, Ludong assures her brother that she can find a safe place. And when her young disciple sees this, she concludes that her master is very particular about safety. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the swordsman notices that the Mo sect left in a hurry without harvesting all the marrow grass and wonders if Lukeo is planning to break through right away. The big tits, Master Ning, informs him that his theory is half correct, claiming that Lukeo wouldn't even have anywhere to store the rest of the marrow grass if he took it home. Suddenly, she pulls out a spiritual box that can store such items and places the marrow grass inside it. Elsewhere, we see our main party next to a waterfall, where the leader is rambling about how things would go in their favor when they have someone looking out for them from above. His sister suddenly informs him that they've scanned the 5-mile radius to confirm that the area is safe, but he teases her by commenting that she's being too serious. He reminds her that he's just going to have his breakthrough, and not survive a heavenly tribulation. But Ludong reminds him that he was the one who taught her the importance of safety. Hearing this, the sect leader sits down and quickly changes the topic so he can achieve his breakthrough. Lukeo comments that he feels like something is about to leap out of his body, so his sister and her disciple get excited, wondering if he's finally going to reach a new realm. Xiaoqiu asks him if he's not going to share some of the marrow-cleansing grass with her, but our boy just tosses it into his mouth before telling her that after eating it, he's going to be in a lot of pain. Of course, the sect leader starts groaning in pain, so the little girl begins to panic and begs her master to help him. However, Ludong doesn't seem to believe his little display. Meanwhile, the swordsman and Ning are watching everything from afar, and the former grips his sword tightly in anger when he sees that Lukeo is about to get stronger. Ning reminds Yu, her disciple, of how he and Ludong awakened their attributes when they broke through their ranks. And the boy admits that it was indeed the case. So, she asks him if he thinks the Mo sect master can awaken his attribute as well, to which he panickingly replies that it's impossible. His master thinks that his reaction is a bit extreme, but the boy feels this way because there has never been anyone who successfully awakened to his attribute after the age of 16. This has been the case since ancient times, and even talented geniuses couldn't do it after turning into adults, which means that Lukeo will be no different either. Ning commends him for doing his homework, and admits that it's definitely too late for the Mo sect master. Had he broken through his rank when he was younger, he might have had a shot at becoming someone remarkable. However, they're all suddenly shocked when Lukeo literally awakens his attribute right in front of them. A bright beam of light shoots out from the hero's body straight up into the sky, and people all over the world instantly realize that someone is awakening his attribute. It turns out that the cultivators of this world enjoy watching spectacles like this, but there's a mysterious guardian in the Mo sect who doesn't appreciate this sudden curiosity of outsiders. All of a sudden, the master spreads her power across the land around our hero, letting everyone know that a master cultivator is protecting him from the shadows. Afraid of the consequences, they all decide that it's better not to watch such an event, because they know that someone who's able to emit such energy could only be a monster. Meanwhile, in the process of awakening his attribute, a huge surge of energy sends our hero into a heavenly plane. As he floats inside the never-ending space, he's overwhelmed by the bubbles all around him, which contain the energies of the heavens and the earths. As our boy floats all over the heavenly realm, he checks each of the bubbles, searching for the attribute that belongs to him. Unfortunately, he realizes that the balls of energy are practically avoiding him when he comes close. He eventually sees one of the balls left behind, and concludes that it must be the attribute that belongs to him. Of course, he reaches out to touch it thinking that it's unique, one of a kind, and befitting for a person of his caliber. Meanwhile, back in the normal Changshuan world, we see Xiao Q opening her eyes to see the massive beam of light in the sky. The power all around them is quite overwhelming, so she asks her master what is going on. It turns out that Ludong gave the little girl one of the marrow-cleansing grass to eat, asking her to call out if she feels any pain afterward. When Xiao wakes up, her master is shocked, making her think that maybe she wasn't supposed to wake up so quickly. However, she quickly notices that Elder Lu isn't even looking at her, so she turns around to see that the waterfall behind them actually stopped, like it got frozen in time. While she's still trying to figure out why something like this would happen, a blinding light slowly lowers from the clouds, and we see that the reason for this is the sect leader's attribute awakening. Yu Yue and Master Ning also see this incredible event, and they're equally dumbfounded, because they realize that Liu Kao actually awakened a heavenly order. The thing is, only the number 1 attribute awakener who wields the power of heaven and earth can receive the heavenly order. Master Ning points out how both the swordsman and Dong Li didn't manage to trigger it, because they weren't the first attribute awakeners of their powers. Hearing this, the already furious Yu Yue concludes that the Mo sect leader not only awakened his attribute, but he is also the very first person to wield the power of heaven and earth. Even though he's pretty annoyed to see this achievement, the swordsman is curious to find out what kind of power the sect leader has awakened. His thoughts are interrupted, however, when his master suddenly reveals that it's the attribute of water. Meanwhile, the other people of Changshuan who are watching the magnificent moment all wonder which sect's disciple the hero is, to be able to call upon the heavenly order. But even though they're all astounded by the sight, they know that there's nothing impressive about the hero's power if he can only trigger the heavenly order 4 or 5 times at best. While they're saying all of this, Liu Kao remains in the sky, surrounded by some bright light and water. For some reason, he can't open his eyes and hears someone talking to him with a loud voice. Just then, he triggers the heavenly order for the 6th time. And while he's at it, his sister watches from below, praying that he would last until the 9th or 8th time at least. Like everyone else, Yu Yue watches the event eagerly, and recalls that according to the ancient scrolls, the lowest person to trigger the heavenly order managed 6 times, while all those who went higher than that did it based on their cultivation power. Suddenly, Master Ning asks him how many times he thinks the sect leader can trigger the heavenly order, and in response, the boy replies that the higher it is, the better, because he can't possibly guess anything about the heavenly order. Meanwhile, back in the sky, Liu Kao finally realizes that the heavenly order turns out to be the repeater, and while he's coming to this conclusion, his sister sees that he's triggered it for the 8th time. But before she can even process that fact, our boy goes in for number 9, shocking her once again. At this point, the sect leader realizes that his fate is up to him to decide, especially since he achieved this feat by himself. And so, he finally opens his eyes to complete his attribute awakening. Our handsome hero comes down from the sky with a message in front of him, confirming that he has successfully awakened his water attribute, and that he has now acquired the power of heaven and earth. A smirk appears on his face as he flexes his new powers, and then his sister approaches him to ask him how he feels. But before he can say anything, her little disciple chimes in, asking the sect leader if she can get more of the marrow-cleansing grass because she loves its taste. Although she doesn't notice, her little stunt earns her death glares from her master, but Liu Kao doesn't seem to care at all. Instead, he responds to his sister's question, claiming that the world feels a lot clearer now that he has his powers. And he says this while displaying his new unique ability to control the water around them with ease. As he gathers the drops of water and disperses them over and over, he admits that this new power seems really useful in many ways, so his sister congratulates him on acquiring his water affinity. The infatuated girl just gets even more attracted, and cautions herself not to drool all over the place since she keeps recalling the taste of the marrow-cleansing grass. While she's wiping her face and getting a grip on herself, the sect leader realizes that he can also control the water inside the bodies of humans. With such incredible power, Liu Kao concludes that he can now manipulate the water as long as there's a source around, which makes it a lot stronger than he had expected. A while later, Dong Li returns from erasing all the marks they left in the surroundings, and informs her brother that they can begin their journey back home. The sect leader commends her for being dependable as always, but claims that no one would know of the miracle he just performed now that she's erased the traces. While using her wind power to turn a leaf into another magic carpet, she reminds him that they have to stay low, because his miracle would only lead to death if powerful people find out about it. The next thing we see is the Mo sect members leaving on their flying leaf, and as they do, we see the spiteful swordsman watching them, thinking about how the man who once dominated over him has probably returned. Master Ning, on the other hand, expresses mild delight that the sect leader has finally shown some potential. However, her disciple remains disturbed, feeling that he's forgetting about something important. And that's when he realizes that it's the fact that Lukeo still hasn't achieved his breakthrough. He informs his master about it, but she reveals that she is already aware of this fact and sincerely hopes that nothing bad happens to their sect leader. While they're busy worrying about his breakthrough, the handsome hero is facing a completely different dilemma. Now that he's gathered enough experience points to level up, he's not sure how many levels he should go up first. He doesn't want to use too many at once, because he might need them to restore his mana, use powerful moves at crucial times, or even gain skill upgrades in the future. But while he's deep in thought, his sister interrupts him by asking the crew to raise their hands if they want to drink the spirit spring water. The two disciples on board grab the opportunity and gulp down the water at once. Dongli then offers her brother a drink, and as he takes the cup from her, he decides how much he's going to level up at first. In an instant, our handsome hero breaks through 5 levels with a single drink, leaving his sister stunned. To him, it's nothing special, but the spies who are still tailing them are equally astonished when they witness this phenomenon. As if Yue wasn't already scared of our hero, now he's seeing his former bully use a single cup of water to go up 5 levels in rank, without even having to sit down or meditate. Seeing this, Master Ning can't help but admit that the sect leader's achievement is quite impressive, because it's impossible for even a genius to level up 5 ranks in a single try. While she's pondering how he managed to accomplish it, her disciple suddenly yells out, claiming that he understands, and suggesting that the sect leader must have intentionally stayed in the beginner's rank all this time. Yue finally realizes that Lukeo never gave up on himself or refused to cultivate further, but in fact, he had his own plans all along. After coming to this conclusion, he asks himself if he would have been able to display the same amount of patience, which makes him realize that he can't compare himself to his rival. While he's beating himself up about the whole thing, his master continues to think about our boy's incredible breakthrough, claiming that it's not so shocking to her after all. That's because she knows that he's always been a peculiar child from birth. And the fact that he never showed any signs of disappointment or negative emotions, despite being stuck at beginner's rank for so long, proves that he has an unbreakable spirit for cultivating. Meanwhile, back on the Mosek's flying carpet, Xiao Q notices that Lukeo looks very worked up, so she asks his disciple if he knows anything. However, the boy tells her that he doesn't know either, and she suddenly points out how he doesn't talk much. All of a sudden, the little girl burps, and a blue aura covers her body, leaving her and everyone else shocked. She begins to panic and asks the elders what's going on, but her master pulls her into a tight hug, congratulating her for becoming a rank 1 cultivator. Xiao is shocked to hear this, and then a message from the system appears to confirm that the Mo sect has now officially fulfilled the standards of a 9th rank sect. Under the message, there's a prompt asking our hero if he'd like to accept the sect's advancement. And as you'd expect, he doesn't hesitate to smash the confirm button. Just like how you shouldn't hesitate to smash that subscribe button either. After the advancement of his sect, another message appears, revealing that he has received 5,000 more experience points, along with 1 attribute for his swordsmanship aptitude. Seeing this, our boy can't help but feel that the rewards are out of this world. Because of the bonus point, his sword aura attribute will be increased in every aspect. He's especially delighted to see that his swordsmanship is no longer at 1, because now he can use some of his experience points to unlock Sword Intent, which is the highest realm in sword cultivation. The thought of his skills skyrocketing after this boost makes him super excited, but he quickly remembers that the brat Yue is also a main character in this world. The guy was born with a swordsmanship aptitude of 10, and he's known as the flawless swordmaster. Our hero gets jealous at the thought of this and starts to feel like he should be called the flawless charmer since his charm is also at 10. While he's still nagging about it, the notification of a mission called the Second Ring interrupts him. This mission is basically to advance the Mo sect from the 9th rank to the 8th, which our hero feels is a bit too sudden. The mission rewards and requirements are displayed, and our boy sees that he needs to accumulate 1,000 points for the sect's reputation. He also needs 3 level 2 cultivators, and finally, the sect must have over 100 disciples. Even though his sect reputation has increased a lot from before, he admits that they still have a long way to go. Just then, another message appears, informing him that he's now at level 15, which unlocks the Master-Disciple system function. Seeing this, he remembers that he can gain experience points by accepting disciples, so he decides to give it a shot. However, when he pushes the button, he's baffled to see the name, Master Lu Qingfeng. From the color of the font, we realize that this character has passed away. And seeing this, the sect leader starts to recall the sad memory of his late parents. He also remembers a poem from his previous life, which he didn't understand till he was reborn in Tiangshuan. Despite the sadness that washed over him, he assures his late parents that the Mo sect will prosper in his hands. As for Ko's disciple, my man notices that he's still just a rank 10 noob. He can't believe he forgot about his disciple all this time, so he decides that it's high time the boy got his own breakthrough as well. A while later, the sect leader confronts his disciple about leveling up and asks him why he hasn't done it for so long. Hai-Ting doesn't say anything, but then we see a flashback of an old man telling people about a child consumed by evil. He warns them to beware of this child, claiming that would take the lives of many. Sure enough, this child turns out to be the little Hai-Ting. Because of the old man's prophecy, the people began to think that the little child caused the death of his parents, so they plot to throw him out of their village before he can bring them any misfortune. However, just when they're about to carry out this heinous act, Liu Keo appears from the crowd, revealing that he's a disciple of the Mo sect, and demanding that they bring him some water to drink. The people turn to look at the person talking, and are immediately mesmerized by his charming appearance. He then turns to the terrified little boy, and asks him if he's really the child that evil has rooted itself in. Afraid and naive, he admits it with tears in his eyes, so our hero offers to take him in as his disciple, regardless of all the rumors. As you'd expect, the crowd tries to discourage him, claiming that the child isn't normal, but he angrily tells everyone to shut up. The handsome cultivator then proceeds to announce that henceforth, the child will serve under him, and that he would take responsibility for whatever happens to him in the future. Little Hai-Ting can't believe his eyes, and while he's still staring in awe, the hero tells him to follow closely behind him, warning him that he won't care about him if he falls along the way. The journey up the mountain was hellish for the poor kid, and Liu Keo had to actually save him from falling. And after looking closely at his face, he joked about the boy being ugly, before telling him to hold tightly to his hand because the road ahead is harsh. In the present, as the master and disciple stand on the flying magic leaf, our hero reveals the parable of the best way to create a great evil. The sect leader states that it starts by giving the child a bunch of abilities, allowing him to lead a horrible life, showing him a little glimmer of light, and then putting out that light at the end. However, he tells Hai-Ting that he's different, claiming that he is the light, and the future most dependable person in the whole world of Tiangshuan. The disciple is stunned to hear this, but our hero just assures him that the darkness in his heart will eventually turn to mist and disappear. The sect leader declares all of this with a flashy display of his power, as he controls the shapes of the clouds and leaves his disciple in a daze. As they soar above the clouds, Hai-Ting is pushed to tears by his master's kindness. A blue aura covers his body, and it's confirmed that in the year 14,921 of the Tiangshuan calendar, Mo sect's eldest disciple, Hai-Ting, broke through the beginner's rank with just a single look at the skies. Another message suddenly appears, confirming that Hai-Ting has successfully leveled up, and as such, our hero earns 5,000 more experience points. Like the main character he praises himself for being very talented when it comes to educating others. Sure enough, when Xiao sees his latest achievement, she has nothing but praise and admiration for him. She begins to applaud him for his awesomeness, and while she's at it, even Yue, who's still stalking them, can't help but admit that the sect leader is truly amazing. He's surprised to see how the hero used the power of heaven and earth, because he initially assumed that there's not much to awakening his attribute in the beginner stage. But after seeing him use his new power to dispel the mental barrier hindering his disciple's heart, the swordsman finally concludes that only Liu Keo is capable of doing something so incredible. Regardless, he can't help but think that the master and disciple are an ill-fated pair. Meanwhile, Dongli approaches the duo in question and suggests that they travel on a magic flying item henceforth, since they've both gotten their breakthroughs. Hearing this, the sect master asks his sister where his own item is, and comments that he'd like a limited edition carpet like the leaf boat from Auntie Ning. Unfortunately, she doesn't know what he means by limited edition, and her hungry disciple thinks that maybe it's something edible. Seeing this, the sect leader reveals that he's in a good mood, so he promises to treat them all to something good if his sister can find them a good place to descend. The two disciples are delighted to hear this, and it appears that Dongli is equally as excited, because she suddenly speeds up the flying carpet so they can find a good place to land. Xiao complains about the speed, but her master informs her that she'll understand later when she tastes the sect leader's food. Of course, it makes the little girl wonder if our hero is really that good at cooking. Not long after they touch down, Dongli bolts off to catch some fish for the meal. And while she's gone, the disciples help set the table. In the process, our hero calls Xiao closer so that he can teach her a thing or two about how to be a cultivator. The little girl hesitates a bit at first, but her hesitation is soon blasted away by the charming smile of our hero. Not long after, an excited Dongli returns, announcing that she caught 2 fish. But she stops in her tracks when she sees her brother teaching her disciple about what to do when a defeated opponent is still being stubborn. The sight catches her off guard, but when she watches for a while, she realizes that the two are really getting along. Xiao is practically finishing the sect leader's sentences at this point, and the latter finds her to be a very promising talent. However, Dongli is horrified by this, because she fears that her brother has infected the little girl with his delusional behavior. So, she does what she feels is best, and breaks up the wholesome moment with a surprise attack on the two. A while later, we see a moody Lukeo preparing the meal while his sister scolds the girl, warning her not to act like the sect leader because it could get her in a lot of trouble. Unfortunately, it's too late for these lessons now because the girl seems to have already been infected with the hero complex. She tells her master not to worry, assuring her that she'll secure the future of the sect. While our hero praises her for this bold declaration, his sister is literally shedding tears at the loss of an innocent mind. The scene shifts, and we see the crew arriving back home at the peak of the Dan King Mountain. Dongli gladly announces that they've returned, but suddenly lets out a burp by accident. Seeing the not-so-ladylike behavior, Xiao asks her master if she really just burped, right before doing the same thing by accident. Of course, the older of the two gets a bit defensive, pointing out that the little girl just did the same thing. Looks like they really enjoyed the delicious fish soup the sect master prepared for them earlier. The master chef in question thinks about how all of his efforts were a joke, and remembers how he had to learn all sorts of Western and Chinese dishes just so he could gain favor from someone he knew in the past. As the crew lands at the entrance of their home, the spies from earlier, Yu Yue and Master Ning, welcome them from their travels, pretending like they've been at home the entire time. The swordsman feels that his master should have been an actress, because even though they literally followed them throughout, she wants them to pretend like it's a coincidence that they're meeting at the entrance. Our hero gets down from the flying leaf to greet them, and after revealing that they went on a trip, he asks if she had to wait long for them. The pretentious woman claims that their meeting is only a coincidence, and then congratulates the sect leader on his breakthrough, after acting like she only just noticed. Our boy tries to take a shot at diving into her enticing chest, but she sees him being naughty and stops him in his tracks. He then requests to receive a leaf boat from her, and the woman somehow agrees to grant his request. It's only after he's done talking with her that he even notices Yu Yue's presence. The sect leader recognizes him as the little brat from years back and taps him on the head, but when the swordsman doesn't react, he finds it a bit strange. Lukeo recalls the time when he and Yu Yue would always fight after he bullied him, but now that he no longer retaliates, he fears that the guy might have awakened his inner masochist. Bro starts to feel weird about it, and hopes that Yu Yue hasn't picked up some weird kinks. A bit disgusted at the thought, he suggests that everyone should head inside, and Auntie Ning offers to help him with his cultivation if he runs into any trouble. She also offers to answer all of Dong Li's questions on the topic, and sure enough, the more mature sibling has tons of things to ask. By the time she's done asking, they're already inside and seated at the table for a meal. The busty auntie asks Ko if he doesn't have any questions, so he finally asks her if it's better for someone with a low cultivation level to break through to higher ranks first, or to cultivate their sword intent first. The question shocks Ning and her disciple, because they didn't expect him to be talking about sword intent so soon. The reason he's asking is because it takes 10,000 experience points to unlock his sword intent, and it takes the same amount for him to level up 3 times, so he wants to know which of the 2 options is greater. Theoretically speaking, Auntie Ning admits that it's better for a swordsman to master the sword intent as early as possible, because from ancient times, all the cultivators who reached the peak of swordsmanship had mastered their sword intent much earlier than others. She further explains that after mastering the sword intent, his ability would be greatly enhanced each time he breaks through a rank. However, as for swordsmanship cultivation without sword intent, his ability's improvement would be slow and lack in the basics. Unfortunately, even though she reveals all of this to our boy, she still feels that he's nowhere near ready to master the sword intent, and she thinks that it would be fruitless if he insists on mastering it. But of course, our boy assures her that he will master his sword intent, and that he won't fall below anyone's expectations. His bold statement shocks the master so much that she almost chokes on the tea she was drinking. While wiping her mouth clean, she points out that she never expressed such an expectation of him, before bluntly telling him that it's impossible to quickly master something so difficult. As you'd expect, our ambitious hero asks why they claim his goal is impossible, and Yu Yue responds to him, stating that it just is. The young swordsman insists that the sword intent is not as shallow as the sect leader might think it is. We then learn that before Yu Yue even stepped into the gates of the sword intent, he had to cultivate like someone who had gone mad, wandering between life and death. And even after all that, all he could achieve was half of the step. If the young swordsman had mastered the sword intent at his age, he would have been able to surpass all the sword sovereigns, who did the same throughout history. After Yu Yue reveals all of this, he makes his point by insisting once again that something as complex as the sword intent cannot be taken so lightly by Lukeo. When the sect leader sees the challenging look on the young disciple's face, he gets offended. Not just because the brat just underestimated him, but because he had the balls to sigh at him as well. This pisses Lukeo very much, and he flips out to the point that he would probably kill him if he got the chance. Lu Dongli notices the tension, along with the discouragement her brother is facing, so she decides to intervene. She thinks about how he's certainly biting off more than he can chew with his new objective, but she also knows that at such a time, she can't point out his flaws, because protecting his reputation is her priority. Meanwhile, Master Ning also notices the little conflict between the two young men, and she finds it a bit amusing. From the argument, she gathered enough to know that her disciple is now half a step into the gates of the sword intent, so she suggests that he and the sect leader trade a few blows to learn from each other. As you can imagine, since the testosterone levels are already off the roof, the two guys don't hesitate to accept the suggestion. Even though they probably want to beat the shit out of one another so badly, Master Ning insists on the fight being fair. She tells Yu Yue that he will have to lower his power, since it's a contest focusing on sword intent. The swordsman agrees to the terms of the duel, and just when the sun starts to go down, we see the two opponents taking their fighting positions on the roof of one of the buildings. Yu Yue then challenges our boy to enlighten him, and unsheathes his sword as he does the same. The moment the young swordsman reveals his blade, a blinding light shoots out of it, leaving Dongli in a state of awe. Seeing the magnificent blade, she concludes that Yu Yue has really nurtured his sword very well. Master Ning tells her that she shouldn't be so amazed by it, claiming that the young lady's blade isn't too shabby either, since she's around the same level as her disciple. Hearing this, the flattered elder chuckles nervously, and that's about the same time little Xiao tugs on her skirt to ask if Yu Yue is really such a skilled fighter. Her master then informs her that he is indeed one of the most outstanding young cultivators of the younger generation. Some even say that he's the strongest in the younger generation. But even though little Xiao is surprised to hear this, she still feels that the contest is a sure win for their sect leader. Hearing this, Dongli is of course shocked at her disciple's confidence, but you can't blame the little one for putting her faith in him. After all, he's got plot armor on his side. Meanwhile, Yu Yue confronts Lu Kao for not unsheathing his sword, and in response, the sect leader bluntly tells him that lives will be lost if he reveals his blade. The young swordsman feels insulted when he hears this, concluding that the sect leader must think he's not worthy enough to make him unsheath his blade. Enraged, he leaps into the air with his powerful supercharged sword and challenges the sect leader to unsheath his sword. However, our boy reveals that he's not trying to insult his opponent, claiming that he sealed his sword for 9 years and didn't do it because he was waiting for Yu Yue. As you'd expect, the hot-headed disciple refuses to accept any excuses, so he charges at the sect leader once again, stating that he will force him to unveil his blade. Our boy isn't a pushover though, so he engages the challenger with his sword still sealed up, and the two proceed to start an intense duel of the elements. Yu Yue attacks with fire, while our hero counters with water-based attacks, and as the fight goes on, little Xiao watches in amazement, thinking about how amazing the sect leader is. Master Ning is also impressed by how Lu Kao has been holding his ground with tricky moves, but his sister fears that he will surely lose if the fight goes on like this. Yu Yue continues his barrage of attacks, demanding over and over that our hero unsheathes his sword, but the sect leader cleverly blocks each one of the blows with his blade. Eventually, Lu Kao manages to dodge an incoming attack, which allows him to pull away from his opponent. With some space now between them, he immediately points out how the young swordsman is forcing him to unsheath his blade, while also refusing to use his developing sword intent. In response, Yu Yue finally decides to use the skill. And as he does, Dongli notices that it's even affecting her sword too, which is quite shocking. However, it has no effect on our boy's sword since it's super stable. This makes him tease the young swordsman, suggesting that his sword intent is too shabby. Of course, Yu Yue gets offended by this, so he unleashes his most powerful sword attack on the sect leader, hoping to teach him a lesson. Unfortunately, just like before, this massive surge of energy doesn't affect our boy, and that's when we find out that all along, Lu Kao was trying to push Yu Yue into using his sword intent, so that he can see the difference between their levels. Now that he's observed the difference and understands the concept, he feels motivated to try it out for himself. He finally decides to unlock his sword intent, which costs him 10,000 experience points. Yu Yue then activates a powerful move called the Lone Sword, in hopes that his opponent would get his act together and catch up to his steps. The attack is blasted at our hero while his eyes are still closed, so his worried sister yells for him to look out. However, he remains unbothered with his eyes shut. And seeing this, Master Ning reveals that her disciple's Lone Sword can't be withdrawn once unleashed. She claims that it's expected, since it's a sword skill passed down by a sword sovereign. But even at that, she decides to get involved because no one can harm our hero under her watch. However, before she can even interfere with the fight, something shocking happens which stops her in her tracks. Out of nowhere, a dark fog appears right in front of the sect leader, which suddenly forms a shield that blocks Yu Yue's lone sword attack. The force from the collision sends waves all over the place, causing Dongli to shake uncontrollably where she's standing. The young swordsman is equally stunned by this, and while he's still trying to figure out what's going on, Dongli realizes that her brother has finally unlocked his sword intent. Witnessing the epic scene, a very astonished Xiao Q watches on, thinking about how the sect leader looks like he just walked out of a painting. Because of how incredible the sight is, it's confirmed that from that day onward, every other weird thing that Xiao sees in the future will only appear normal and insignificant to her. As the fight continues, our hero casually grabs his opponent's blade mid-air with his fingers, and as Yue sees this, his eyes widen in disbelief. Lukeo just smiles smugly, commenting that anyone can acquire the sword intent if they're smart enough, before tossing the weapon back at the boy. However, the young swordsman is so shocked by what he just witnessed that he refuses to believe the sect leader achieved complete sword intent, which was deemed impossible. At this stage of denial, he unleashes another attack at our hero out of anger, but Lukeo counters all his blows effortlessly, before deciding to flex his powers by using his sword intent to disarm the loser. The young swordsman loses his sword as it floats around in the air, and as it lands behind the sect leader, he points at the boy to inform him that he's lost the duel. With 2 fingers inches away from his neck, the young swordsman stands there in shock, wondering why things turned out this way. Stinged by the pain of defeat, Yue begins to recall how he sealed his cultivation to train his swordsmanship. He had to spar with other skilled masters and ferocious beasts, just so that he could master the sword intent. He had sacrificed so much of his efforts with no results, while the sect leader acquired the same skill without lifting a finger. A wave of anger and bitterness washes over him as he asks himself why it's the case. Even though he has accepted his defeat, there's something that he still doesn't understand, so he hopes that the sect leader will be able to answer his question and clear his doubts. While he's saying all of this, Lukeo casts a spiritual wind technique, and then gives the young swordsman permission to ask his question. Yue then begins to speak, talking about how he's read the ancient record left behind by their ancestors in the Sword Pavilion. He reveals how throughout history, Swordmaster seniors advised against mastering sword intent before breaking into the third realm. Aside from this, Yue also reveals that after consulting the Lord Sword Saint on the matter, he was told that with his power, he'll be able to master the sword intent once he breaks into the third realm, and that it wouldn't be an impressive feat. Unfortunately, he still hasn't achieved it, and he doesn't understand how the sect leader did it, so he asks Lukeo to tell him how he acquired his sword intent. However, our boy tells the young swordsman that since he has the ancient records of the ancestors, and even access to the Sword Saint Senior, it's practically equivalent to standing on the shoulders of a giant. He then suggests that the young disciple should set his sights on something higher, since he's already on the shoulders of a giant. The sect leader smiles as he looks into the sky, reminding Yue that history is something that should be surpassed. And truly, the young swordsman realizes that he's right. Lu Dongli notices her brother feeling himself and acting all wise, so she concludes that he's probably acting out again like usual. Meanwhile, Yue suddenly bows to the sect leader, agreeing with everything he said, and admitting that he's not to be compared to someone like him. Lukeo's sister sees this and almost freaks out, because now Yue has been infected with her brother's behavior as well. The swordsman isn't done asking questions though, because he also wants to know when our boy started comprehending such profound knowledge. After a brief pause, Lukeo boldly reveals that it was from the moment he held the sword in his hand, leaving everyone with a stunned reaction. This incredible feat is explained by Lukeo when he admits that his sword intent was exchanged for the experience points, which he gained from the first moment he held his sword. So, to him, his conclusion makes sense. And even though he's a cheater, he's a hardworking one at least. Once again, Yue bows before his senior, thanking him for the enlightenment, and as Master Ning sees this, she's actually a bit touched, because she feels that the 2 young men indeed have a genuine friendship despite their rough past. The young then swordsman reveals that he has another question, and our hero nearly snaps at him for this, because he doesn't understand why he has so many things to ask. Yue finally requests to have a look at the sect leader's sword, but the latter bluntly tells him that he'll die if he grants that wish. Our boy reveals that his blade, Buwan, which means not late or not too late, hasn't been unsheathed for the past 9 years, and that the young swordsman isn't ready to handle it. Hearing this, the boy asks the sect leader if it's because of the incident from years ago. Back then, there was a mysterious monster that caused a mess in their area, and our boy's parents encountered it by chance. Although they worked together to fatally injure the beast, they were killed in the process. Yue concludes that if the sword was truly prepared for that monster, it means that it would need 10 years of effort to unsheath it, which he's definitely not worthy enough to face. This is because our hero intends to unsheath the sword on the same day he would take his revenge. Later that night, we see our boy taking a stroll, and while he's at it, he thinks about how Auntie Ning and Yue will be staying over for the next few days. He doesn't mind at all if it's only the lady, since she's preparing to craft a flying tool for him as well. And just as he says this, we see Auntie Ning sneezing in her room. She concludes that someone must be talking about her, and then gets back to work, deciding that she'll cast another defensive spell for our hero because he has an appearance that makes people want to beat him up. As she begins to conjure the spell, the scene shifts back to the sect leader, who's annoyed by the thought of Yue staying for a few more days. He feels that the only reason the brat is staying is that he got enlightened 3 times after their spar. He's even more annoyed that the young swordsman thinks he'll be able to master the sword intent after digesting the knowledge. But our boy quickly calms himself down, remembering that he's a cheater and that he doesn't need to envy the brat. Besides, he's already broken through the beginner's realm, so he's sure that he'll acquire some new skills in no time. A while later, the sect leader arrives at the cemetery where he plans to speak with the benefactor that lives in one of the graves. Lukeo knocks on the headstone like usual, and sure enough, the spirit shows up after a while. The sect leader then asks the benefactor if she notices anything different about him, feeling that even though she's not very smart, she should be able to detect that he's broken through at least. However, the spirit is dazed and dumbfounded, so a disappointed Lukeo is forced to reveal that he's broken through, asking her what she has to say about it. Before saying anything, the spirit points to the sect leader's ring, and realizes that she's not going to respond to him until he provides an essence of his blood. He reluctantly begins to perform a mini-ritual, stating that he wouldn't be going through all of it if it wasn't that the benefactor helped him overcome a crisis years ago. Although the spirit is like a cheat, he knows that she's bound to the Mo sect by a contract, and ensures their safety. However, every generation's sect leader must pay a price for this. Lukeo reveals that his father used to give a spiritual bead every month when he was alive, but now the spirit demands the most precious thing to men, which is blood essence. After extracting the drop from his body, he begrudgingly gives it to the benefactor, feeling sad because he knows that he's practically given her 10 drops of his blood. The spirit gobbles it down in delight, and the sect leader admits that he's sucked dry already. He feels it's a shame that there's no incense in their world, because if it wasn't for the generous condition she set, he wouldn't want to give her his blood. Just then, the benefactor plays her part and provides him with a scroll containing the second volume of the air condensing technique. Our boy picks up the purple rank cultivation technique, thinking about how each sect has a different one. In the world of Changshuan, every cultivator has a different technique, and while the blue rank are already impressive, the purple ranked one is even more mind-blowing. This technique works by liquefying the surrounding spiritual aura and then absorbing it into one's body like they're drinking water. As mentioned in the 100 ways of drinking water, this technique is the perfect match with his water attribute, and he's sure that the low-tier purple rank technique will even be considered the most valuable treasure in one of the province's best sword sects. However, when he takes a closer look at the object, he's shocked to see that it's actually a purple rank mid-tier item, so he asks the benefactor the reason for the mix-up. Unfortunately, the confused spirit suddenly begins to malfunction, so he concludes that the rank for each volume of the air condensing technique is different. The conclusion pushes him to believe that there's even a chance he can get an orange rank cultivating technique in the future, and this excites him to the point that he's willing to squeeze out even more of his blood essence. Desperate to get that orange rank technique, the sect leader volunteers to squeeze out some more in exchange for the other volumes, but the benefactor just puts on a blank expression. Our hero is somehow able to interpret this as her saying she lost her memory, so it makes him wonder why he can even understand what she's trying to convey. It's almost like they're in sync, but Lukeo claims that it's not the case, and that the true reason is simply the fact that he's already used to the spirit. The benefactor waves goodbye to our boy, and he concludes that she must be really happy because she got to enjoy his blood essence. Meanwhile, back at home, Ludong is freaking out over something as usual, but her confident disciple assures her that everything will be alright, because she's the future of this sect. At this point, the master bluntly tells Zio that her overconfidence is the exact reason she feels so hopeless. The sect already has a deluded member in the person of her brother, but now that there's one more like him, she fears that the little girl would probably get herself in a lot of trouble. Zio just makes things worse by calling herself unique, so her frustrated master decides that she'll just have to protect her in a different way, since the girl has already acquired 30% of her brother's essence. With this in mind, she warns Zio not to tell anyone she's her disciple whenever she leaves the mountains. But this confuses the little girl, so her master instructs her to say that she's Lukeo's disciple. After this, she practically throws her disciple out, claiming she has no other option. Dongli then recalls the stories her brother told her about how most geniuses only care about showing off and teasing others. Using the stories as an analogy, she remembers how the geniuses would bully everyone in their sect without any resistance, which makes her afraid that she might also end up getting beaten in the future because of Zio. As the little girl skips away, Ludong wonders if she should just pass her on to her brother right away. Eventually, she decides that she'll just make Zio's training harder to make sure that no one is able to defeat her. And once she's sure of this, then she knows she'll have nothing to worry about. At this moment, Ludong vows that henceforth, she won't be accepting any more disciples, and that she'll also keep the girl out of trouble by ensuring she stays on the mountain until she cultivates to a passable standard. She swears this on her brother's life for good measure, and by the time she's done, she's satisfied that everything is well prepared to prevent her from training another disciple. The master begins to recall memories of her former student, someone she treated like a precious disciple, and later betrayed her by wanting to marry her brother. As Ludong talks about this former disciple, we see the girl in question sneezing elsewhere, as she wonders who is speaking ill of her. At another place, we see the sect leader sitting on a large rock, thinking about how experience points are more important than cultivation. It turns out that whenever he cultivates, he appears like a divine being. He accomplishes this by gathering the spiritual energy in the atmosphere and absorbing it to gain experience points quickly, which also scours his flesh. Unfortunately, this scouring is basically like injecting air into the blood vessels. Just imagining it is pretty painful, so it's easy to see why the air condensing technique is similar to dysmenorrhea. At some point, Lukeo begins to cough blood, so he decides to stop for the night because there's only so much pain he can endure for a few extra experience points. He lies down in exhaustion, wondering if there's an easier way to cultivate and gain experience points, which makes him wish that the benefactor gave him a double cultivation technique instead. But you see, a double cultivation is performed through the act of sex with the opposite gender, and to our hero, just the thought of having his bodily fluids being sucked dry is a bit horrifying. That's when he notices something moving in the sky, and as it gets closer, he realizes that it's Auntie Ning on her flying leaf carpet. He's surprised to see her and asks her why she came, and the woman responds that she's completed the spiritual tool he requested. The lady claims that they're headed back to the sword sect, so she wanted to specially send it over to him first. Yu Yue tries to get Lukeo's attention, only to get ignored by him completely. Meanwhile, the sect leader embraces the lady, asking why she has to leave so soon. Hearing this, she informs him that she's not as free as he thinks, also revealing that there are lots of troubles she has to sort out back in the sword sect. After making her point, she gives him his item, which turns out to be another magical leaf. The hero is shocked when he sees that it's a leaf light boat, a blue lower rank item with a one-time hidden ability to use the water curtain spell. The reason he's surprised is that the item is usually an upper-level transportation tool. And although it might sound better, it's actually less powerful than what she created for him. On top of that, she added a hidden ability, so our boy concludes that the lady must really care about him. Auntie Ning notices his surprise, so she asks him if he doesn't like it, thinking that he can't see the water curtain spell she added for him because of his current level. However, he explains that he likes it a lot, and admits that he's a bit overwhelmed by it. In response, she tells him to work hard on cultivating so he'll be able to see through it, even though she quickly finds out that he already has. Our boy assures her that cultivation is a must, especially since he wants to live for a long time. But the woman seems a bit stunned by his words. We then see a flashback of Lukeo's mother telling him that her life's goal and biggest dream in cultivating is to live till she's 500 years old. Unfortunately, she didn't achieve that. And looking back now, the hero is baffled by how bravely she charged in to fight the monster that ultimately killed her. The sect leader reveals this to Auntie Ning, and tells her that he wants to live to 500 years for his mother's sake as well. She admits that she understands, before giving him a jade slip containing 10 types of simple spiritual tool refining techniques, hoping he would like to learn them. Master Ning also encourages him to pick up more skills, suggesting that he might be gifted in the field as well. But looks like our boy is simply overwhelmed by how easily he acquired a skill book. Afterward, she hops on her leaf so she can return to the sword sect with her disciple. Our hero wishes her a safe trip on her journey ahead and waves Yu Yue off like a fly. As they leave, Lukeo tells her to drop by again soon, but as the leaf disappears into the night sky, something else enters his line of sight. Before he can figure out what it is, the speeding scroll flies past and crashes near him. After glancing at the object, he's somehow aware that it was sent by the Zhengjin sect, and wonders how they were so bold to send it to him so openly. The scene shifts to the Sword Sect, one of the 4 top sects in the world of Tiangshuan, and certainly the strongest one in all of Qingzhuo. This glorious sect leads over 300 others under it, and among these sects, they are divided into upper 100, middle 100, and lower 100. Unfortunately, the Mo sect is at the bottom of the lower 100, making it the undisputed lowest sect of the already lower rank. Our boy finishes reading this irritating report, and rips the piece of paper in anger, wondering why the sects in the lowest positions are ranked anyway. To him, it makes no sense because the strongest shine in their own unique way, while the weak are more or less the same. Lukeo thinks about how the Zhengjin sect decided to start a ruckus when they're only just a bit higher than the Mo sect in terms of rank. The annoying sect lies in the lower middle class, which isn't exactly impressive, and yet they had the balls to act so rashly with our hero's sect. The handsome sect leader finds their behavior very arrogant, and starts to recall how the Mo sect is actually in charge. It turns out that the Zhengjin sect, the Q Shui sect, and the Mo sect all coexist within a radius of 50 kilometers, an area that our hero's sect controls. Lukeo suddenly remembers how the Mo sect took in the others at first, and it makes him baffled at how they have now become the masters of the land sort of. In the past, the Mo sect would always be the one to invite the other 2 sects for meetings, but now the Zhengjin sect is trying to usurp their power because our boy's dad has passed away. At this point, our boy is so pissed off that he throws the knife that came with the message, and as he infuses it with mana, he sends it back to the Zhengjin sect as a warning for them to not even think about acting smart around him. Meanwhile, in the Zhengjin sect, we see the sect leader having a chat with Lin Long, a disciple of the Q Shui sect. While discussing, the visitor suddenly suggests that it won't be long before the Zhang Jin will become the #1 clan in the land, since it has prospered. Hearing this, the Zhang Jin leader, he too, jokes about how embarrassing it is that the Mo sect's Liu Kao only just broke through the beginner's realm not too long ago. The old man believes that our boy's skills and talent aren't even enough for the Mo sect to challenge him anymore. But while he's still saying this, Liu Kao's response in the form of a dagger swiftly flies in through the open window. Not surprisingly, he too catches it effortlessly as he grabs it barehanded. He says that the younger sect leader must be very terrified, judging by how quickly he responded. This brother has no idea how wrong he is. Seeing this, Lin Long eagerly states that they should read Liu Kao's message, thinking that our boy probably wants to surrender and bend the knee or something. She feels this way because to her, they're in a generation where the strong force the weak to yield to them, and in her mind, it's time for the Mo sect to give in. Of course, he too is equally anxious to see what the reply is, so he taps on the dagger to reveal the message, but he's extremely shocked and disappointed when he sees that our boy quite literally left his first message on scene. At this point, you can tell that Liu Kao wants all the smoke, and of course, the Zhang Jin sect leader doesn't take his little stunt lightly. Lin Long is equally pissed off, feeling that our hero sees them as his subordinates or something. After building up all the rage in his body, he too finally lets it all out, feeling that the Mo sect leader is an arrogant brat with no manners. As you can expect from a cunning messenger, Lin Long fans the flames of his rage by telling the sect leader that Liu Kao is overconfident in his ordinary skills. She then suggests that they teach the rude brat a lesson in a gathering of the 3 neighboring sects. Hearing this, he too admits that he was thinking the same thing. He also suggests that they should come up with a good plan to make our hero realize what it means to be strong. Time passes and the scene changes back to the Mo sect, where we see the sect leader having a private discussion with his sister. At the table, Dong Li asks him if he'd like her to accompany him to the gathering of the 3 sects, which is in 3 days. However, he isn't interested in her offer, so he casually tells her that there's no need and continues to sip his tea. He says that people will think the Mo sect is weak when they see her, because she's still concealing her cultivation. Determined to tag along with her brother, she offers to conceal less and show a little bit more, but Liu Kao insists that she just stays at home obediently. All of a sudden, a gust of wind swooshes into the room, and while our boy notes that it's full of desire, Dong Li is horrified, because she knows that it means Liu Bing has finally broken through. Because of this, she begins to wonder how her bratty disciple managed to break through this fast, and at the same time, she's very angry that Liu Bing didn't cultivate in seclusion for a few more years. The sect leader is shocked when he sees his sister grumbling about her main disciple, so he asks her if she doesn't like the student who just broke through. He's baffled by it because compared to his own main disciple's appearance, he feels that she should be more grateful. However, this statement makes Dong Li so furious that she slams the table, shocking her brother in the process. Seeing Liu Kao defend her disciple, she says that he's already fallen for her, so she decides that she's not going to allow it. As she pulls his cheek in a show of aggressive sibling love, the sect leader seems not to know what she's even talking about, and is more concerned with her letting go of his face so she doesn't reduce its value. While the brother and sister bicker, the scene changes, and we see a flashback of Liu Bing's life. Standing on a flower-themed stage, it appeared that some kind of auction was underway, and as the crowds cheered louder, her pain increased as well. The young lady recalls how back then, she used to fantasize a lot about the world in her storybooks. She wished for some young prince to descend from the sky and take her away from that place, but deep down she knew that it was just a fantasy. The bidding finally comes to an end, when someone at the back of the crowd offers a whopping 10,000 taels. Everyone present is shocked by this, and a very loud silence fills the room in an instant. As you can imagine, they're all curious to find out who would make such an enormous offer, and when they turn around, they see that it's none other than the handsome sect leader in their midst. The nobleman confidently repeats his offer, and confirms that he'll have the girl that's currently on auction. Liu Kao's sister also came along with him, but her appearance is different, and as the 2 siblings march forward to meet the person everyone has been bidding on, the people in the crowd begin to murmur. They conclude that the sect leader must be an idiot with so much money to burn away, that he's actually willing to spend that much on the girl's first night. Even though he clearly looks intelligent, his latest decisions tells the people otherwise. But while they're all being sorry losers, the woman making the sale is more than delighted to present him with the young girl, telling him that he has good taste for buying her first night. Seeing Liu Kao for the first time, Liu Bing admits that he looks quite decent but ultimately decides that he's no different than the other customers. However, he drops a bombshell when he reveals that the insane amount he offered isn't to buy the girl's first night, but in fact, it's meant to buy her. Hearing this, the young girl is shocked and so is her current master. The lady making the sale admits that she won't lose anything if she sells the girl at that price, especially since they don't even live long in their line of work. With this conclusion, she pushes Liu Bing to her new master without a second thought, and as the veil on her head falls to the floor, the scene changes once more. That night happened to be Liu Bing's birthday, and all she can remember is that the sect leader looked like a god that descended to save her. Unfortunately, Dongli is constantly on the watch to make sure that this fairytale story never actually happens. Back in the present, we're given a little backstory to Luo Bing's life. The girl was abandoned by her parents when she was 6 years old and ended up getting sold to a brothel where she was raised for 5 years and taught many things, like reading, writing, and especially the ways to please a man on your first night. Once again, we see that flashback of her auctioning night. Because she was turning 11, all the pervs and pedophiles gathered around, desperate to the girl for themselves. The auction for her first night begins on a light note at only 10 taels, so most of the shameless customers have enough time to flex their deficient bidding power. They shamelessly try to one-up each other, raising the bar higher each time, to the point that the other workers in the brothel become jealous of Luo Bing, because she was born with an appearance that draws all